The box was heavier than it looked, and Mara Voss almost dropped it on the third-floor landing when Priya Anand's door opened behind her. "You're stealing my files," Priya said. Not a question. Mara turned, arms full of a banker's box labeled Daniel, Tax 2021-2023 in block letters that weren't hers, and said the only true thing available to her: "I'm stealing somebody's files. Whether they're yours depends on what's actually in here." Behind her, Theo's sister Renata stood frozen on the stairs with a second box, the look on her face suggesting she'd just realized she was an accessory to something. Priya Anand had lived across the hall from Mara for 14 months and had never once smiled at her. Not in the elevator, not at the mailboxes, not the night Mara's smoke detector went off at 2 a.m. and Priya stood in her doorway in a robe, arms crossed, watching the fire department leave without a word. Mara had decided, somewhere around month 3, that Priya simply didn't like her and had stopped trying. Now Priya was looking at the box in Mara's arms like it contained her son's heartbeat. "Those are from my storage unit," Priya said. "The one on Bergen." "How do you?" She stopped. Her eyes moved from the box to Mara's face to the lanyard still clipped to Mara's blazer, the one she'd forgotten to take off after work, the one that read Forensic Accounting, Voss and Rain. "Oh," Priya said, very quietly, like a door closing somewhere inside her. "You're working for him." "I'm not working for anyone," Mara said. "I'm trying to figure out if I should be." It had started 9 days earlier, with a man named Daniel Cho standing in Mara's office doorway, holding a referral card from a divorce attorney Mara had worked with twice before, asking her to do a quick forensic pass on his ex-wife's freelance income for an upcoming custody hearing. He'd been pleasant. Specific, he'd worn the kind of suit that cost more than Mara's monthly rent, and carried himself like a man for whom doors had always opened slightly before he reached them. He'd said the words "best interests of Eli" 4 times in 12 minutes, which was, Mara would later realize, exactly 4 more times than a person says it when it's true. "She's been underreporting for years," Daniel had said, sliding a folder across Mara's desk like he was dealing a winning hand. "I just need someone credentialed to put a number on it." Quietly, before the hearing. Quietly, Mara repeated, flipping open the folder, scanning invoice totals that already looked, even at a glance, oddly tidy for a freelancer. "You understand, I report what I find, not what helps your case." "Of course," Daniel said, smiling the kind of smile that had clearly worked on judges, juries, and at least one ex-wife. "I only want the truth. I just happen to be confident about what it is." She'd taken the retainer. She always took the retainer first and asked the real questions second. It was a bad habit, the kind that paid her mortgage. The real questions started with the numbers. Priya Anand, freelance graphic designer, reported income that didn't match her invoices, which didn't match her bank deposits, which didn't match a string of transfers from an LLC Mara had never heard of with a registered agent in Wyoming, and an address that turned out to be a UPS in Reno. The LC was called Brackish Holdings. The LC's sole listed officer was Daniel Cho. Mara had sat with that for a long time, the cursor blinking on her screen, 3 coffees gone cold beside her keyboard, before she understood what she was looking at. Not evidence that Priya was hiding income to look poor for the custody hearing, which was the story Daniel had paid her to find. Evidence that Daniel had been routing money through his ex-wife's old freelance accounts years ago, before the divorce, and was now positioning those same accounts as proof of Priya's instability, using a financial structure he himself had built to convict her of a crime he'd committed. "He's not hiding money from her," Mara said out loud, alone in her office, the night she found it. "He's hiding money in her." Renata found Mara at the storage unit 2 days later, having gotten there from the other end. She was Theo's sister. Theo was Priya's divorce attorney, and Theo had spent 11 months trying to get a forensic read on Brackish Holdings, with no luck, because every accountant he'd hired had quit the second Daniels firm sent a cease and desist about client confidentiality that Daniels' firm had no standing to send. The storage unit itself was the kind of place divorces went to die slowly. A roll-up door on a dead-end row. Boxes labeled in 2 different handwritings, where a marriage's filing system had clearly fractured somewhere around year 6. Mara had a key, because Daniel had given her one, instructing her to pull whatever you need for the freelance income analysis, apparently not having considered that the boxes also contained 4 years of his own firm's correspondence, boxed up during a move and never sorted. "You're the accountant," Renata said, not unkindly, holding up a phone with a photo of Mara's business card, the one Priya had apparently kept, unsmiling, in a kitchen drawer for over a year. "The one who lives across from her. I didn't know that when I took the case." "Does it matter?" It mattered enormously, and Mara didn't have an answer that made her look good, so she helped carry boxes instead. "He gave you a key to all of this," Renata said, watching Mara lift a second box, this one labeled in Daniel's tight, lawyerly print. "Did he even look through what was in here before he handed it over?" "I don't think he's looked through anything in 6 years," Mara said. "I think that's rather the point of how he's gotten away with it this long." Renata laughed, short and surprised, the first unguarded sound either of them had made since the lobby. "Theo's going to want to talk to you tonight. Properly, not in a parking garage at 9 p.m. "Tell him I bill by the hour," Mara said, "and then tell him I'm not billing for this part." Priya let them into the apartment that night, which Mara understood, even as it happened, to be an act of considerable risk on Priya's part. Letting the woman hired by her ex-husband sit at her kitchen table, with her ex-husband's files spread between them, like a crime scene. "Why didn't you ever smile at me?" Mara asked. Because it had been sitting in her for 14 months, and she didn't know if she'd get another chance to ask it. Priya laughed, short and without humor. "Daniel's firm is 2 blocks from this building. You moved in 6 weeks after our final hearing. You're a forensic accountant. I thought you were his. From the day you signed the lease." She looked at the box. "Turns out I was right. I was just early." "You weren't entirely wrong," Mara said. "I am his, technically. He's paying my invoices right now, as we speak, for a report that's due to the court in 6 days. She put her hand flat on the table, on top of a bank statement with Daniel's handwriting in the margin. "I just haven't decided what's going to be in the report." Eli's drawing was taped to the refrigerator behind Priya's head. A stick-figure family. 3 people. One of them crossed out in red crayon, and then, in a different, smaller hand, uncrossed out again. Mara found she couldn't look away from it for several seconds. "He did that himself," Priya said, following her gaze. "Crossed his father out after a visit that didn't go well, and uncrossed him out 2 days later, because he missed him anyway. That's the part none of this paperwork accounts for. Eli doesn't want a verdict. He wants both of us to stop being people he has to manage." "That's not a number I can put in a forensic report," Mara said. "No," Priya said. "It's the only number that actually matters, and it's the one nobody in that courtroom is going to ask about." For a moment, neither of them said anything, and the apartment held the particular quiet of 2 people recalibrating 14 months of assumptions in real time. "Can I ask you something else?" Priya said, "before the lawyers and the deadlines take over the rest of this week." "Go ahead." "Did you ever actually believe what he was paying you to find? Even for a day?" Mara thought about it honestly, because the question deserved that much. For about 6 hours, the first day, before the numbers stopped adding up. I believed it because believing it was simpler, and because he's very good at being believed. She looked at Priya across the table. Then the numbers told me something else, and I've found over the years that the numbers are usually more honest than the people standing next to them. That's a strange way to live, Priya said. Trusting spreadsheets over people. It's worked out better than the alternative, so far, Mara said. Present company being a recent and notable exception. Priya almost smiled at that. The corner of it, anyway. The first real movement Mara had seen on her face in 14 months that wasn't suspicion. Don't get used to it yet, she said. I'm still deciding. The hearing's Thursday, Priya said finally. Custody review. If the judge sees what Daniel's been feeding the court, that I've got unexplained income, unstable freelance work, a pattern of financial deception, he gets primary, not visitation. Primary. Eli moves 2 states away to live near Daniel's parents, and I get him 6 weeks a year if I'm lucky and current on every payment Daniel's lawyers can invent. He's lawyering the math, Theo said, arriving with his own box of subpoenaed bank records and the exhausted energy of a man who had been losing this exact fight in slow motion for almost a year. Which is the worst kind of fraud, because it looks like diligence. The first reveal came at midnight, when Mara finally cross-referenced the Brackish Holdings transfer dates against Daniel's law firm payroll calendar and found the pattern had a rhythm to it. Money moved out of the firm's trust account and into Priya's old freelance accounts on the same 3 days every quarter. The same 3 days Daniel's firm filed its compliance audits. He wasn't hiding the money from her, Mara said, turning her laptop so Theo could see. He was parking it in her name during audit weeks, so his own trust account balanced. She was his shell. She just didn't know she was renting out the space. Theo went very still. That's not custody fraud. That's trust account embezzlement. That's his license. That's 6 years of it, Mara said, scrolling. Going back to before the divorce was even filed. You realize what you're holding, Theo said. Not quite a question. If this is real, this isn't just useful for Thursday. This is the kind of thing that ends a legal career and possibly starts a criminal one. I'm aware, Mara said. I'm also aware I was hired by the person it ends. There's a version of tonight where I hand this back to him quietly and pretend I never opened that folder. And there's a version where I don't. And only one of those versions lets me keep sleeping in this building. Then, we do it carefully, Theo said. Every date sourced, every transfer documented. Nothing that gives his firm room to call it speculation. If we're going to burn this down, we do it with paper, not with feelings. Renata, by the window, said the thing none of them wanted to say first. If he's been doing this for 6 years, and he's about to go in front of a judge waving Priya's financials around as evidence she's unfit, he's not bluffing about being scared. He's about to be audited by the state bar, regardless of what happens Thursday. He needs Priya discredited before anyone looks at where that money actually came from. This isn't about Eli. It never was. Eli's the leverage. By 2 a.m, the second reveal had a face, a forwarded email, buried 9 folders deep in the files Mara had pulled from Daniel's own Discovery production. A production he'd clearly handed over without reading carefully, assuming no one would either. The email was from Daniel to a colleague at his firm, dated 4 months before the divorce filing. Move it through P's old LLC again before the audit. She won't notice. She never looks. He's calling her P, Priya said, reading it twice, her voice flat in the particular way of someone keeping something from cracking. Like an account number. This is the line, Theo said. This single email, properly authenticated, ends the hearing in your favor in about 4 minutes. It also probably ends his career. Mara felt the floor of the night shift under the relief of it. They had something real. something with a date and his name attached, until her phone buzzed against the table, and she saw the message, and the relief went cold in her chest. It was from Daniel. Heard you were seen leaving Priya's building with another woman tonight. Interesting friendships for someone billing me $1,100 to stay objective. We should talk before Thursday. He's watching the building, Mara said. He'd had someone in a car across the street, it turned out. Not for long. Not well. But long enough to photograph Mara and Renata carrying boxes out of the lobby at 11:40 p.m. Long enough to build the only weapon he had left once the money trail turned on him. Not evidence, but a story. A story about Mara, the unsmiling neighbor, and the other woman, the late hour, the appearance of impropriety. Priya's own phone buzzed twice before sunrise, and when she showed Mara the screen, her hand wasn't quite steady. It was a text from an unknown number, sent at 4:50 a.m. A single photo of Eli at his after-school program 2 days earlier, taken from across the playground fence, and underneath it, 3 words. He's fine. For now. That's not him, Priya said, too fast, the way people talk when they're trying to convince themselves before they convince anyone else. Daniel wouldn't. He loves Eli. Whatever else he is, he wouldn't use Eli like that. He doesn't have to be the one holding the phone, Theo said quietly, already photographing the screen, already dialing a number that turned out to belong to a private investigator licensed in 2 states. The same investigator whose car had apparently idled outside Mara's building 3 nights running. He just has to make sure you know someone's watching and that you're too scared of losing custody outright to call it what it is. Then, call it what it is, Mara said, out loud, on the record, today, before Thursday, not after. A man who's about to lose his law license over 6 years of fraud doesn't get to also win the argument that you're the unstable one, while his investigator photographs your son through a fence. Priya called Theo's office line herself 20 minutes later and reported it. The report went into the same file as everything else. One more entry on a growing list of things Daniel Cho would have to explain to a judge who had not yet heard a single word in his defense. The third reveal arrived the next afternoon, by way of a letter from Daniel's firm to Mara's firm, copying Voss and Rain's managing partner, alleging that Mara had engaged in an undisclosed personal relationship with the opposing party prior to and during the engagement, and demanding she be removed from the case for conflict of interest before Thursday's hearing. It was, Mara realized reading it twice, a lie built entirely out of true facts arranged to mean something false. She had left the building with another woman, late, carrying boxes, and Priya had never smiled at her, and a person could stack those true things into a shape that looked exactly like the affair Daniel needed it to look like, if no one looked closely enough to notice the boxes were full of his own emails. He's trying to get you disqualified before Thursday, her managing partner said on the phone, not unsympathetic, but careful. If there's any truth to a personal entanglement with the opposing party, Mara, I need to know now, not in front of a judge. There's no entanglement, Mara said. There's a neighbor who spent 14 months thinking I worked for the man who's been laundering money through her name, and she was right to think it, until about 36 hours ago. Make that distinction in writing. Today I will, Mara said, but you should know what's actually in the letter he's threatening to escalate. It's not really about me. It's a smokescreen. He's trying to get me disqualified before Thursday, because once I'm off the case, the report defaults to whatever junior associate he assigns to finish it, and that associate won't have seen what I've seen. There was a pause on the line, long enough that Mara could hear her managing partner deciding something. Send me everything you have. Tonight, if what you're describing is real, the firm needs to know before opposing counsel makes it our problem in a press release instead of a courtroom. She sent it. Every transfer, every audit date, the email, all of it. And her managing partner called back 40 minutes later. His voice different. Careful in a new way. This isn't a conflict of interest case, Mara. This is a man trying to disqualify the one accountant who found out what he did. Stay on it. The firm will back you. Just make sure every document is sourced 6 ways before Thursday, because his lawyers are going to come at this from every angle they can invent. They already have, Mara said, thinking of the playground photo still sitting in her phone's camera roll. The one she hadn't deleted. The one she didn't think she'd ever delete. Daniel himself showed up at Priya's building Wednesday evening. No investigator this time, no lawyer voice on a phone screen, just him, standing in the lobby in the same navy suit he'd wear to court the next morning, asking the doorman to buzz an apartment he no longer had a key to. "I just want to talk to her," he told Mara when she came down instead, having watched the lobby camera feed from Priya's tablet upstairs. Not about the case. About Eli. A father's allowed to see his son's mother before a hearing that decides his future. "You're not here about Eli," Mara said. "You're here because you read tonight's filing and you know exactly what's in it. And you wanted one more chance to make this about anything other than 6 years of trust account transfers." Daniel's composure slipped, just slightly, the lobby light catching something tired underneath the practiced calm. "You have no idea what you've done. Do you understand what happens to a man's entire life over one email taken out of context?" "I have a very good idea," Mara said. "I've spent 9 days reading the rest of the context. There isn't a version of it that helps you." She didn't move from the doorway. "Go home, Daniel. Get some sleep. You're going to need to be sharp tomorrow for what's left of your case." He left without another word, and Priya watched from the stairwell above, having come down halfway despite every instinct telling her not to, and said, once the door had swung shut behind him, "I used to be terrified of that exact look on his face. The tired one, right before he says something designed to make you feel crazy." She came the rest of the way down the stairs. Tonight it just looked like a man running out of road. The fourth reveal, the one that actually mattered in a courtroom as opposed to a kitchen at midnight, came from Renata, who'd spent the day doing the thing Mara couldn't do herself without violating about 6 rules of professional conduct. She'd gone back through every audit filing Daniel's firm had submitted to the state bar for the last 6 years and laid them next to the Brackish Holdings transfer dates, and found that the discrepancy wasn't hidden. It was structural. Every single audit had passed because the money was always home by the time anyone checked. "It's not one bad year," Renata said, spreading the printouts across Priya's table like a fan of cards. "It's the architecture of his entire practice. Thursday isn't just a custody hearing anymore. If Theo gets this in front of the judge correctly, Thursday is the day Daniel Cho's law license starts dying." Priya sat down very slowly in her own kitchen, looking at 6 years of someone else's crime laid out where her son's drawings usually were. "I spent a year thinking I was a bad mother because I couldn't account for money I never knew existed," she said. "I spent a year being told by his lawyers, in that very calm voice they use, that something was wrong with my numbers. There was never anything wrong with my numbers. There was something wrong with him." "There still is," Mara said. "We just have until Thursday to make a judge see it instead of you." Theo spread a legal pad across the table and started a list, his handwriting getting smaller as the list got longer. "We have 2 days to get all of this admissible. The email's the anchor without it authenticated. The rest is a pattern with no proof of intent. With it, the pattern becomes a 6-year paper trail of a man laundering money through his ex-wife. Renata, I need every audit filing cross-referenced by tomorrow morning." "Mara, I need a clean forensic report that stands on its own if the email somehow doesn't clear. It'll clear, Renata said. It might not, Theo said. Courts authenticate inadvertently produced privileged material maybe 60% of the time, and his firm's going to fight it like their license depends on it. Because it does. He looked at Priya. I need you to understand that going in. We might walk into that courtroom Thursday with the best evidence either of us has ever seen, and still not get to use the one document that makes it simple. Then we make it simple anyway, Priya said. Without the email if we have to. We will, Mara said. It's just easier with it. Theo filed the authentication motion Tuesday morning, a narrow legal window. The email and the trust account records needing to clear evidentiary hurdles before Thursday's hearing, or none of it could be raised in time. The court clerk confirmed the motion would be ruled on by end of day Wednesday. If it cleared, the documents went in front of the judge Thursday morning. If it didn't, Daniel walked into that hearing with nothing standing between him and primary custody except Theo's word against Priya's documented instability. Exactly the outcome he'd spent 6 years building toward without anyone, including Priya, understanding why. 26 hours, Theo said, reading the clerk's email twice, like the words might rearrange themselves into more time. We need the clerk to clear evidentiary authentication on a 6-year-old internal email by tomorrow at 5. Or none of this goes in front of the judge Thursday at all. Daniel apparently understood the same clock, because Tuesday night Mara's phone rang with a number she recognized from the referral card that had started all of it. I think we should discuss the conflict of interest letter before it goes any further, Daniel said, pleasant as ever, the same voice that had said best interests of Eli 4 times in 12 minutes. I'd hate for your firm to have to formally investigate something that could just as easily go away. You're offering to withdraw the letter, Mara said. In exchange for what? In exchange for a complete report. The one I'm actually paying for. The one about her income, not whatever you think you found in my discovery production. A pause, careful, lawyerly. Whatever you think you found in there was privileged and inadvertently produced. It's not admissible. It's not even yours to have looked at. You sent it unredacted in a stack of 4,000 pages and told me to find what I could find, Mara said. I found it. That's not a privilege violation. That's Tuesday. We'll see what a judge says about that on Thursday, Daniel said, and the pleasant voice didn't even flicker. Withdraw, Miss Voss. Submit the report I hired you for. Or I make sure every accountant in this city knows you slept your way into a case file. He hung up before she could answer, which she understood. Sitting alone in her apartment with a line dead in her hand was its own kind of answer. He was afraid enough to threaten her reputation outright, which meant the email mattered exactly as much as Theo thought it did. She called him back anyway, 20 minutes later, after she'd stopped shaking and started thinking clearly again, and he picked up on the second ring, surprised enough that the pleasant voice slipped for half a second before he recovered it. I'm not withdrawing, Mara said, and I'm not submitting the report you paid for, because the report you paid for is a lie I'd be signing my license to. You can tell the bar that yourself on Thursday, or I can tell them for you. Those are the only 2 versions of this where you still get to call yourself a lawyer next month. You don't know what you're threatening, Daniel said, the warmth gone entirely now. I know exactly what I'm threatening, Mara said. I've had your numbers for 9 days. You've had a pleasant voice for 6 years. One of those things actually holds up in court. Priya knocked on Mara's door 40 minutes later, still in her work clothes, holding 2 mugs of tea she hadn't asked if Mara wanted. I heard you on the phone with him through the wall, she said. I'm sorry. Apparently I'm still listening through walls even when it isn't him I'm worried about. You weren't wrong to, Mara said, taking the tea. 14 months of evidence said I was exactly what he wanted you to think I was. 14 months of evidence also said you were going to write whatever report he paid for and let my son grow up 2 states away, Priya said. And instead you're sitting in your kitchen at midnight with his Discovery production, getting threatened by his lawyer voice, for a neighbor who never once smiled at you. She looked down at her own mug. I keep waiting to understand why. Mara thought about the drawing on the refrigerator, the crossed-out figure uncrossed in a smaller hand. Because somebody uncrossed your son back into that family drawing. And it wasn't going to be Daniel, and I had the one skill in the world that could prove it shouldn't have to be him deciding who stays in the picture. Priya didn't smile. Not exactly, but something in her face came unlocked that hadn't been unlocked in 14 months, and she said, I won't smile at you tonight. Ask me Thursday, and Mara found, absurdly, that she was willing to wait. The clerk's email cleared the authentication motion at 4:51 p.m. Wednesday, 9 minutes before the deadline, and Theo called Mara before he'd even finished reading it himself. We're in, he said. Thursday, 9 a.m. The email and the trust account discrepancy both go in front of Judge Aldana. Daniel doesn't know yet. His team's still planning to walk in with your unfinished report and a conflict of interest motion against you. Let them, Mara said. I finished the report an hour ago. It's just not the report he paid for. Thursday morning, Daniel Cho walked into Judge Aldana's courtroom in a navy suit with the specific calm of a man who believed he had already won, carrying a folder of Priya's discrepant freelance statements and a motion to disqualify Mara Voss for conflict of interest. He nodded once at Priya across the aisle, the way you'd nod at an opponent whose loss you'd already filed away as a formality. Theo went first, and went carefully. He laid out the freelance income discrepancies Daniel's team had flagged, and then, methodically, traced every flagged dollar back to a Brackish Holdings transfer, dated, sourced, time-stamped against Daniel's own firm's quarterly compliance audits. Counsel, Judge Aldana said, looking up from the exhibit for the first time. Are you telling me the petitioner is alleging financial instability based on deposits his own LLC made into the respondent's account? Your Honor, that characterization, Daniel's attorney began. It's not a characterization, Theo said. It's a bank record. He entered the email next, move it through P's old LLC again before the audit. She won't notice. She never looks, and let it sit on the projector screen for a full 10 seconds before he spoke again. 6 years of this, Your Honor. 6 years of trust account discrepancies disappearing into an account he then used as evidence of her unfitness. Daniel's lawyer tried, once, to raise the conflict of interest motion against Mara. Judge Aldana looked at it, looked at the email with Daniel's name on it dated 4 months before the divorce filing, and said, with the particular dryness of someone who had read both documents in the same folder, Counsel, I'm having difficulty understanding how an accountant's neighborly relationship is the irregularity I should be focused on this morning. Your Honor, the appearance of impropriety, the appearance, Judge Aldana said, is that your client spent 6 years building a financial shell out of his ex-wife's name and is now in my courtroom asking me to take his son away from her for the crime he committed. I'd like to hear less about Miss Voss's neighbors and more about Brackish Holdings, Counsel, before I lose what little patience I came in with. Daniel did not look at Priya for the rest of the hearing. He looked, once, at Mara across the gallery for one long second and said nothing, because there was finally nothing left that the pleasant voice could do. The hearing recessed at 11:40 a.m. for the bar referral to be formally entered into the record. 18 months of fear compressed into a single line on a docket sheet. And Priya sat in the hallway afterward, with her hands pressed flat against her knees, breathing like someone who just set down something enormous. "It's over," Theo said, sitting beside her. "Not the bar process. That'll take a year. But this, the custody fight. The financial accusations. The part where he gets to use Eli as a lever, that part's over today." "Say that again," Priya said. "Slowly. I want to actually hear it this time." "It's over," Theo said again, and this time Priya let herself laugh. A real one. The kind that came out half like crying. Renata sat down on the other side of her and didn't say anything at all, just put a hand on her shoulder and let her have the moment without narrating it. Down the hallway, Daniel's attorney was already on the phone with the firm's managing partners, and through the courtroom's frosted glass door, Mara could see Daniel sitting alone at the now empty respondent's table, his folder of Priya's discrepant statements still open in front of him. Useless. The numbers in it finally meaning exactly what they'd always meant, and nothing else. Eli got his mother for the summer. Full custody pending the bar's formal investigation, and a drawing on the refrigerator with no one crossed out at all. Priya called Mara from the hallway before she'd even taken her coat off, her voice doing something it hadn't done in 14 months, catching, then steadying, then breaking into something that was almost a laugh. "He asked if you could come to his birthday," Priya said. "Eli did. He's 7. He doesn't know what a forensic accountant is, but he's decided you're the reason his dad isn't picking him up anymore, and he's apparently fine with that, in the very direct way 7-year-olds are fine with enormous things." "Tell him I'll come," Mara said. "Tell him I don't even need cake. I'll bring my own spreadsheet if it helps him understand what I actually do for a living." "Don't," Priya said. "Let him keep thinking you're a superhero a little longer. It's a nicer story than the truth. And the truth is mostly just you not sleeping for 9 days." Priya found Mara in the hallway that evening. Both of them home from a day that had taken 6 years to actually end. And for the first time in 15 months, she smiled. Not politely, not for show, but the unguarded kind that had clearly been saved up a long time, aimed at exactly one person. "I owe you a year of smiles," Priya said. "I was paying interest on the wrong assumption the whole time." "You can start with the one you're already giving me," Mara said. "I'll consider us square." "I'm not sure I want to be square," Priya said, and didn't elaborate, and didn't need to, and Mara found she didn't smile either, not yet. She just nodded once, the way you do when something true has finally been said out loud and doesn't need an answer tonight, and left the door between their apartments open a few inches wider than it had been in 14 months, which, for now, said everything that needed saying. Later, much later, after Renata had gone home and Theo had filed the last of the paperwork and the building had gone quiet around them, Priya knocked once more, holding 2 mugs again. And this time, she didn't wait to be asked why. "I spent 14 months deciding you were the enemy because it was easier than deciding nothing about my life made sense anymore," she said. "I don't want to spend the next 14 deciding what you are instead of just finding out." "That sounds like a longer conversation than tonight," Mara said. "It is," Priya said. "I've got time now. For the first time in years, I actually have time." Have you ever spent months building a story in your head about someone, convinced you knew exactly who they were and exactly why they'd never once looked at you with warmth, only to find out the cold front you'd been bracing against was never actually about you at all? And is there someone in your own life right now who you've quietly written off as closed, distant, or done with you? where the real story, the one you've never bothered asking about, might be the thing that finally explains everything. If you were brave enough to knock on the door and ask,